Hello there, and welcome to episode 110 of the Fixing Football podcast. With me, your host for this evening, Liam O'Meara, and just me this evening. So, Martin is still on week 3 of his podcast paternity leave, and unfortunately, Luke and Scott can't join us this evening, so I thought I would take this opportunity, whilst I've got the microphone to myself, to essentially rant at you for a few minutes about why I think and what changes I would do to football, whilst I've got no one here to tell me why I'm wrong or why my ideas are absolute nonsense. So I'm going to rattle off loads of different ideas, why I think they're good, and when I think they should be implemented. Firstly, the Premier League at the moment, the biggest challenge that you've got in that league is too many games. So there's a lot of talk at the moment that players are playing too much and that the new competitions are just filling in those gaps that players have at the moment for rest. The problem is that a lot of these new tournaments are pitting the best teams against each other, which theoretically is what is going to be driving the economics of football forward. So how do you make room for these games? And how do you take advantage of these games happening to share that money through the football pyramid? The answer to those that will look at it is actually quite simple, and it's to reduce the size of the Premier League. If you were to reduce the size of the Premier League from even to 18 teams, that would dramatically reduce the workload, particularly those weekend games that you've got there as well. But I would actually propose a 16-team Premier League season with a championship of the same number in a Premier League 1 and Premier League 2 system, similar to you have in Germany with the Bundesliga, with a higher distribution of wealth and money off the TV deal going to the second tier and then filtered through the football leagues. This would dramatically reduce the weekends needed to fulfill a Premier League season, and also would provide that further opportunity for money to be sent down the levels. It would also, in my view, address the widening gap between the Premier League and the Championship. At the moment, we are seeing an increased trend of those teams that are getting promoted struggling to stay in the league without significant investment. You look at Nottingham Forest, great achievements that they've done, but they did have to essentially spend beyond what was allowed in their PSR limits. Those teams that come up, they unfortunately have to abide by Championship PSR rules as well as the Premier League ones, so theoretically have lower budgets than those in the Premier League. This would eradicate that problem, meaning that teams are subject to the same rules in Premier League 1, Premier League 2, and can invest in that division knowing that they are playing off the same accounted losses as their teams that are in Premier League 1. You would have a 2 up and 2 down system on there. I'm open-minded to playoffs as well with regard to that, how that gets decided. We could even have 3 up, 3 down with the less jeopardy and the less cliff edge of that Premier League on 1 and 2 and the gap not being quite as big. That would allow for that. But you've got that flexibility there. This would then allow for quite a significant increase in weekend games, which is where a lot of these expansions do want to come in. So we're seeing an increased amount of games in Europe. So Champions League, Europa League, and Europa League all want to extend and increase the amount of games that they're playing. Really, what they want is weekends. You know, that is the prime time viewing. That is what the Premier League is able to completely own and get the full advantages of, which Europe can't tap into, except for maybe finals week, which is, we've seen that move to the weekends in recent years. This would allow for that to some extent, not fully, but to some extent. And it would mean that these competitions can further expand. So a big talking point for me at the moment, and something that I don't think we talk about enough in football fans, is almost the elitism of European tournaments. Why are they restricted to the teams at the top? is there not an increased case for more European competitions? The Europa League has been a thriving success. The biggest argument against this is the increase of games, but we've addressed that with the reduction of the league to allow for more continental football and the increased revenue that would bring to each individual club. I personally am for European competition all up and down the pyramid. I appreciate there would be some limits in terms of the crowds that you would get and the TV interest that you would be as you go further down. And I suppose the argument that they would make at the top is that this potentially would dilute the product even further. But as a premise, I'm very much open to it. So you could have this going all the way up and down because you've freed up the calendar. So that would be the first things that I potentially would address. In terms of the Football League, from then underneath, so underneath your top 32, if you would be now, the remaining 60 clubs, no reason why that can't be 3 divisions of 20. No one talks about the workload that goes into the teams in the Football League, particularly with those increasing cup competitions. Well, not only have you got your 24-team leagues, you've also got your EFL trophy games, your League and FA Cup if you were to progress through them, playing Saturday, Tuesday every week. The reduction to 20 would alleviate the pressure on that as well, quite significantly. Also, while we're talking about the EFL trophy, for me, there's no reason for Premier League 2 teams to be in that. I know that there's been an increase in prize money with the introduction of those, and part of the distribution of Premier League wealth was to increase the prize money of that competition to allow the Premier League 2 teams in there, but we've barely seen any of them lay a scratch on any of the Football League teams that are down there. If anything, it's just detracting from a very successful loan system. I don't see the real value in it. I'm sure other people have a different opinion, but that cup being given back to the clubs. So doing away with the Premier League 2 teams in that competition, fully EFL trophy, potentially straight knockout as well to reduce the allocation, again, to reduce the amount of games. That competition, I say that as a fan of a team that has done rather well in it. We've won one trophy. We've got to the quarterfinals in other years. It is great when you reach the final. Other than that, the games are relatively poorly attended. Maybe I'm being harsh. Maybe the semi-final does see some decent attendances, but really, whilst I do see the merit in having a Wembley day out for the teams, I think a straight knockout in that competition would make it a little bit more spicy as well. No seeding, straight knockout, no regionalisation. No one's really bothered about that. That makes no difference. I'm not really seeing any evidence that makes a difference to attendances in any kind of football. So no regionalisation, straight knockout. Let's see how that goes. But three leagues of 20 with the remaining 60 clubs, and then your top 32 club. Now, from those, 3 up, 3 down. And that includes the National League to the Football League, which, of course, the Football League would never vote for. Well, quite a lot of these proposals that I'm making here that football would never vote for, because essentially the members will vote for football themselves. And that is very unlikely to change, even with what people think a regulator is going to do. It's certainly not going to be able to influence that. But living in an ideal world where people were able to take their self-interest and put it into a box for a moment and look at what might be better for everyone. Home and away games, 20-team leagues, 3 up, 3 down, encouraging that investment in the National League by having 3 promotion relegate places. We're seeing a real opportunity for teams lower down the pyramid at the moment for external international investment. A lot of that is due to Rob McElhenney, or Rob Mack, I believe he is now, and Roundell's investment in Wrexham and other parties in that part of the world seeing the opportunity of investing in a club at that level, taking them to a higher thing. And the way fantastic. They can invest in the area. I don't like it sometimes when they get promoted ahead of Bolton, but what can you do? So having this kind of thing in there where they are incentivized to invest by making it able to get out of that National League. Because at the moment, with the bottleneck, and not only have you got these sort of high ambition international invested clubs scrapping for those places, you've also got your ex-Football League clubs as well. Some pretty big hitters in there. I know that Oldham came up last season through the playoffs. Well, relatively big hitters, sorry, Oldham. But you've got these types of clubs there. You need to still have that pathway. So those clubs being able to invest into there would absolutely do it. So that's the league structure of the English league structure, and some nod towards what Europe could look like for those clubs. Part 2, the cups. Now, the FA Cup had a real renaissance year this year. Now, I'm going to stick my neck out and say that I don't think this is more of a one-off than we would like. I don't think this is going to see a reignition of the fire and interest in the FA Cup across the leagues. They've been poorly attended for a long time, cup games, particularly in the lower rounds, particularly in the lower leagues. Yes, I do see that some of the big clubs do get decent attendances, but they are often reduced ticket prices and usually day trip fans that can't get tickets for league games. Not criticising them for going, they're as passionate as everyone else, I'm sure. But if you look at the broader issue, it's that there is no real interest in the FA Cup, I don't think. Yes, I know Crystal Palace fans and whatever will have different things based on this season, but we've got to look at the bigger picture. That is not the trend. So what can we do to reignite these cups? Firstly, I don't think we need 2 of them. I think the League Cup adds little value in terms of what it brings to it into the English game. Yes, I've seen that Newcastle did get the chance to win it this year, but if the only reason we're keeping that trophy is because occasionally a team that doesn't normally win things can win things, that's not a driver to get more success. It's, for me, the League Cup's purely a broadcast vehicle. It's a way of making money for the Football League because the distribution of wealth in the Premier League isn't good enough. That's my own opinion. I think that we could do without the League Cup, which I think the majority of the Premier League would probably be in favour for, as part of a repackaged deal as part from the Premier League and the Football League. And that would essentially drive out the need for that cup. Also, in terms of the FA Cup, there's quite a few changes that I potentially would make to the FA Cup. Firstly, is in regards to the reduction of replays and getting rid of replays. I don't think anyone likes that particularly. But I understand it from this idea of playing too many games. So I do understand that argument. I do think there is a case for that. But I think there's an easy workaround here. And I think it's that if a team in League One or lower draws against a Premier League team, that team gets to choose where that game takes place. Whether it takes place at the Premier League team's ground or their own. They choose at that point. And I think if you were to do that, you get rid of a lot of that for it. I know a lot of other sports and cup competitions will have the seeded element where, to protect the potential revenue stream for the perceived smaller club, they will allow them to have the home game, knowing that they're going to get a big away following from the big. I think Rugby League do something similar to Challenge Cup now. And I think that's not a terrible shout. The only thing I would say is that the revenue potential of having a game at the Emirates as opposed to Ebbsfleet is quite significant. So Ebbsfleet, in my proposal, would be able just to choose where that game takes place. And you almost taking away the need for the replay because you've already got the payday. They win because they have earned that opportunity to earn that money through progressing through the cup. they don't miss out because essentially they were picked on the wrong side of the draw, and then they go on to lose or, go to extra time and whatever, similar to we saw to Tottenham in the third round this year. So they don't have that. So if they choose, then I think everyone wins, really. I think that's a pretty... I'm sure someone who's listening to this will... I mean, I've listed off a lot of things. This wasn't even planned, to be fair. But I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will find flaw in that and whatever. But there it is. Point 2, and this is a little bit more controversial, is the quarterfinals. Now, a big thing at the moment is across Europe, other leagues that are maybe struggling a little bit with their TV commercial deals are looking potentially at how they can improve their revenue streams and how can they build essentially a stronger base abroad to sell their packages abroad. So teams like Serie A, La Liga, they've not quite done it yet, but they're very close to playing genuine competitive matches abroad. I know La Liga have their Super Cup I think they've done it in Saudi Arabia a couple of times. And yeah, I mean, that's close. I think Serie A did the same actually this year, maybe the year before. So I get, but we're talking genuine league games or genuine cup games. And now you can see where I'm starting to go with this. So how can we get ahead of that? And as fans ensure that we're not seeing those league games, those genuine Premier League games or Football League games that we have being sold abroad. But we have to give them. If you want to get something, you have to give something. So I propose the 4 quarterfinals. So the 4 FA Cup quarterfinals are generally, Premier League teams facing off each other, with the exception of a few Football League teams. I know we had a couple this season. So I think Preston got there away at Aston Villa. So there's an incentive there. I propose that the 4 Premier League quarterfinals, not Premier League, FA Cup quarterfinals are played abroad. And each of those games is played in a different country with a certain allocation of tickets and at a preferential rate apportioned to fans of each club. And it almost becomes a cup final in itself. So let's say, I'll use America because we've got the Club World Cup going on there at the moment. Let's say we had 4 cities chosen, and each of those 4 ties is played at one of those host cities over the weekend, and it becomes a FA Cup quarterfinal weekend, and it adds a new layer of prestige onto that game. Now, I appreciate this idea might not be for everyone. And I already know from saying it that it is flawed. But I think it could be a winner. And I do think that it can allow for the FA particularly to build their revenue streams as well. Because that's what ultimately we're all talking about here. So it is, in my view, a good option. But other people will have their ideas as well. So with that being the most controversial one, I'm going to leave that with you for now while I have a quick break and try and gather my thoughts before I talk about something else. And I'm back. So, hello everyone. Bolton Wanderers. Let's talk about the mighty Bolton Wanderers for a little bit. So, I've really struggled this summer, to be completely honest. I think I was quite annoyed at how last season turned out for a lot of reasons, but mainly the wastage of it. For me, and I think what's frustrating is you say this now and it sounds like you're doing it in hindsight. It sounds like it's easy to say this now that you've seen what happened, but it was so obvious that Bolton needed a change after that playoff final. There was not it was quite clear there was no fight left in the team. It was clear that they'd had the day, and the overarching feeling of disappointment from not only missing out at Wembley and playing so horrifically bad on that day, but also missing out on the last day of the season with Derby, when Bolton very much had that in their own hands in the games leading up to that last day. Disappointment that change was needed. The silence in the place for days and weeks on end after, while the club decided what they wanted to do, while other clubs around them had already started to maneuver in the transfer market. And don't forget, the problem you've got when you're in the playoffs is that you're losing 3 or 4 weeks on everyone else anyway. So teams that have been promoted or been relegated or know where they are, they can already start planning for the season, knowing what division they're in. So if you're in the playoffs, you don't have that luxury. So to have that, and then this period of uncertainty while people decided if they had another year left in them or how they should proceed, it was just obvious that that was going to end this way. There's a reason that so many teams that fail in the playoff final then will fail in the following season. And it's not only because of this feeling of failure, it's because of the lack of preparation time that you've got going into a new season. And so it was obvious for me. And again, I appreciate this is in hindsight, but it was obvious that this was going to be a challenging season for Bolton. That, and we'd been sussed. We didn't change anything. So we went into the season with the same playing style we'd done in, 3 previous seasons at League One level. We'd become predictable. People knew how to play against us. There was almost a blueprint that was set by Oxford in that final. And, Des Buckingham would tell anyone that would listen how he masterminded that Bolton victory. So it was there. And it was quite clear the fragility of the Bolton fans as well. And I think this was something that maybe particularly the board underestimated, how quickly that was going to turn with another bad start. Because the one thing that the Inever era at Bolton can be negatively defined from, in my opinion, is the slow starts. And it was almost every single season. So it was no surprise that it turned. But then afterwards, it's almost been a complete rip out the pieces and start again, which, don't get me wrong, I was up for an overhaul, but then it's almost like we're completely abandoning what was good and what might have worked. And because we needed to sort of the idea of your director of football slowly making incremental changes and that you're bringing in people that can do X, Y, Z, that almost goes out the window. And we have a position where we have square pegs in round holes in a team now, where we have more number 10s than more than number 10s than even Mikel Arteta would know what to do with. And we having to scramble and sell anyone that has interest in, to the point where the first credible offer that we get in for Aaron Collins is the one that goes. So Aaron Collins, for those that don't listen to, aren't Bolton fans, which I imagine is most people in the world, he's Bolton's top goal scorer last season, player of the year. And I'm not Aaron Collins' biggest fan by any means, but he certainly wouldn't have been the first on my list of people that need to leave the club. Now, he's obviously gone to MK Dons in League Two. This is someone who, within the last 12 months, has stated how he wants to, his ultimate goal in his career was to earn a cap for Wales. And for me, stepping down a division isn't the best way to facilitate that. But, good luck to Aaron Collins. I was just surprised at where he chose to move. I'd be surprised if he didn't have other interests. He's a good player. But the fact that that's where Bolton are having to start, because that's the player that is essentially garnering interest, means that it becomes difficult to do this rebuild, because there's other players who are still in contract, who you may be wanting to move on sooner than that, but can't because there's no interest in them. And it makes this rebuild of bringing in a completely new backroom staff, a completely new technical staff. It's what makes this more difficult, and it ends up becoming another 2 or 3 year project rather than an immediate one. Having said that, I do like the business that we've done already in terms of the players that we bring in, particularly Sam Dolby. It's nice to see a big number 9 look potentially coming in for Bolton. So these are the challenges that we're going to have. And we're coming into a new season that is going to be, in my view, not necessarily as tricky as the last one. So last season we had Birmingham, Wrexham, who deservedly were promoted, but they, in terms of revenues and what they can achieve off the pitch, it's incomparable. Like even us as a League One big club, we can't compete with the money that they can generate in however they generate it. With Birmingham spending was well documented, and again, I'm not complaining. Like, they've got the money, they invested it, they went up, fair enough. And Wrexham, obviously, they can benefit from the probably unique situation of what their revenue streams and the sponsors they can attract internationally allows to. And again, fair enough. I'm not doing anything wrong. But it just means that 2 automatic permissions, it becomes a little bit trickier. So that has been a difficult one. Whereas this season, it's maybe a little bit more open. So you've got, I think, Stockport, who heavily backed, and another year into their further in progression, who I think will be, in my view, the team to beat this season. Bookies don't see it that way, but that for me, they'll win it. But you've also got Luton, who are a bit of an anomaly in the sense that, as far as I can see, it looks like they'll have Premier League parachute payments next season. I've not seen anything to suggest that's not the case. So that gives them a huge advantage in terms of what they could potentially invest in a squad. And they made mistakes last year. And I think they were caught sleeping at the wheel. We talked a lot in the podcast in previous episodes of how they invested their Premier League money and didn't necessarily build a Premier League squad capable of staying up. Well, they didn't build a squad capable of staying up in the Championship either. So you've got to think at some point they're going to learn the lesson and invest that money wisely. Who knows? Luton fans might tell us differently. If I speak to one ever, I'll maybe know the answer to that. But I imagine they'll be quite strong as well. Huddersfield look like they've been quite busy. So Bolton do have competition, but it isn't as clear cut. Like, Birmingham were always going to win the league last season. Wrexham probably did better than most thought they would do, but there was always a chance they could do that. And, they made signings in January to really kick on. So there was always a chance. So there's a real opportunity for Bolton here. But we do need enforcements, and we do need those wide players. It's quite clear that's the way that we want to play. We do need to bring them in. So I think these next few weeks are going to be vital in terms of us getting the money that we need into the squad and looking to kick on. In terms of what we can reasonably expect, no one talks about top 4 in the Football League because obviously you either got top 2 or top 6, so I kind of get it. But for me, top 4 as a goal makes sense. And hopefully we can aim and do that. And I've got nothing else, guys. I think I've done pretty well here. We've got the best part of half an hour out of me in terms of some thoughts. Some of it you'll agree with, some of it you won't. Appreciate that. If you want to listen to more, and usually there's other people here, we can have a good bit of chat, a bit of a laugh. You can get on the fixingfootballpodcast.com. Please like, subscribe. Martin will be back with us as soon as possible. We love hearing your feedback, guys. Please share it with us, and thank you very much. Cheers.